we used to sit, remember this, the timing was about 2016, and Kubernetes had launched uh, year and a half ago at that time. So it was sort of picking up momentum. And I used to sit right next to the Kubernetes team, and there was quite a bit of conversations with them. And some of the things that they used to complain about, like what's missing in Kubernetes, is there were things around, hey, there were three things that were key that I always we used to hear. One was around observability, which is like, hey, if we have all the performance numbers of like how pods are doing, but we don't have like traffic numbers and L7 performance numbers, which is exactly what like developers care about. The second thing we used to care about was all the load balancing and the constraints around kube proxy, which was sort of the inbuilt thing in Kubernetes and still is, and the gaps that they had seen around ingress. And the third thing, this was really an idea that mostly was born out of Google, which is this notion of a service identity. And this wasn't something that was really known to the world, or really something that anybody was doing, but at Google was happening at scale, which is an identity, a cryptographic identity for a workload that you can identify, and then you can use that for doing all the encryption between services and so on. So we basically there was a white paper called Spiffy at that time, which was a rendition of the internal thing called LOAS, which was what this workload identity framework was, low overhead authentication scheme. And really, the last piece in the puzzle of Istio was overlaying that into what other capabilities that we already had and we were thinking about. So really, Istio was born out of like, the gaps we heard in Kubernetes, the idea of like plugging those gaps, and the learning we had from running the API platform architecture within Google, combining those two, and then taking on the security concepts that were there within Google and combining them into a project. I think Envoy always had this sort of write your own control plane, like Java and Go control plane. And a lot of people do that even now. And a lot of people did that early on. So the idea for Istio was like, we will give a control plane which is sort of native to Kubernetes, right? So we will something that really understands what's going on in Kubernetes, so I can learn everything from what's happening in that environment, and can then give all these behaviors via envoys, right? So that was the starting idea of Istio. I remember people were sort of, because of the proximity of these two teams, and there was so much excitement around creation of this project that once we decided to do it, there was like a whole bunch of teams, developers started to move from API platform team and Kubernetes team into this project, and at a pretty rapid pace. This is, I think, August, September 2016 timeframe, and we took on quite an aggressive timeline of like getting 0.1 shipped in summer of 17, and I think that was shipped in May of 17 at GlueCon. The other approach that was taken in launch of Istio outside of technology was to make it a collaborative sort of project from the get-go, and not make it a Google-only project. Or so there was, specifically we had had IBM as one of the partners there. They were working on something called Amalgamate, which was a rendition of Nginx to figure out the routing problems. And so they folded those efforts into Istio. And then with that, the initial version was launched. And then, once it was out there, there was a host of people who sort of joined the bandwagon.